Evening and welcome. We have 3 meetings tonight. The first will be a special meeting of the Urbana City Council, followed by the monthly meeting of the Cunningham Township Board, and that will be followed by the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole. So for the Urbana City Council special meeting, will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Next up is public input. Does anyone wish to address the special meeting of the Urbana City Council? Okay. We have one item of business tonight, and that will be the mayoral council appointment for Ward 3. I wish to nominate Ms. Charisse Hersey for the position of Alderwoman in Ward 3. Ms. Hersey was born and raised in Urbana and is a graduate of Urbana Public Schools. She holds an associate's degree in liberal arts from Parkland College and a BA in social sciences from California State University, Dominguez Hills. She has a background in education, music and theatrical performance, and administrative support duties. She worked as a classroom and substitute teacher in the Long Beach Unified School District, Long Beach, California, for 15 years. Ms. Hersey has expressed interest in increasing communication and safety within Ward 3 through the formation of a neighborhood association and neighborhood watch groups. She has also advocated for locating a full-service grocery store and other core services in Ward 3, and for recognizing the ward's historical leadership in promoting racial and social justice in Urbana. I believe Ms. Hersey will be an articulate voice for the residents of Ward 3 and ask that you support this nomination. Is there a motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion that we accept that nomination.
Moved by Dennis.
Second.
Seconded by Eric. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes. That motion passes unanimously. So I would like to ask Ms. Hersey to step forward and we'll swear her in. After me. I, Charisse Hersey,
I, Charisse Hersey,
having been appointed to the office of Alderman Ward 3
having been appointed to the office of Alderman Ward 3
in the city of Urbana,
in the city of Urbana,
in the county of Champaign, Illinois,
in the county of Champaign, Illinois,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
of Alderman Ward 3 to the best of my ability.
of Alderman Ward 3 to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Welcome to the Urbana City.
Makes me feel as though I've been around for a long time because she's the fourth person.
And while Charisse is getting her packet, I would like to thank once again all the people who applied for this position. This was the hardest decision I've had to make as mayor. We had excellent applicants who came with many ideas and fresh perspectives, and I just wanted to thank everyone who applied. And 3 of the applicants are in the audience tonight, and I would love for us to recognize them. So we have Ms. Stacy Burnett, Eldris Melinda Carr, and Pastor Courtney Carruthers. Would you please stand so we can express our appreciation? And I know that you all will be very involved in Ward 3 and work with Ms. Hersey to advance the issues and interests of the ward and the city of Urbana. So thank you again very much. Okay, with no further business before this meeting, the meeting is adjourned.
have an extra one. Do you need an extra one?
We've got one.
Okay.
We just don't have enough of these.
Oh, those are huge.
Oh, good. Now we do have them.
Bigger, it's bigger. Oh my gosh. That's much better. I can read that one. I couldn't read.
It was on Thursday, so hopefully that's fine.
All right, our second meeting tonight is a meeting of the Cunningham Township Board. It's January 14th, 2019. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustees Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Hersey.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. We have several sets of minutes from the previous meetings, December 3rd, 2018, the public hearing from December 3rd, the December 10th City Council joint meeting, and the January 7th City Council joint meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
I'll second.
I'll go on each side. So moved by Jared and seconded by Mary Alice. Any corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Any additions to the agenda? No additions? Public participation. Does anyone wish to address the Cunningham Town Board? Seeing none. Committee to verify bills, Town Fund, and GA Fund.
Yeah, so you have before you my monthly memo. The town fund, we had $50,610.61 in expenditures. General assistance fund was $98,689.74 in expenditures. The total for the month was $149,300.35.
Any questions for Danielle? Eric?
Just quickly, what are the trend lines? Is this above or below your expected expenditures?
Oh, so I think this is generally on par. We did, so I have a couple of notes in the general assistance statistics, which I can go over. We are essentially kind of bouncing up and down. We hit a ceiling of, I think the highest was 125. We then came down to 87. We've instituted a process of doing a warning and then a termination once we do a warning. So and we actually hand the warning with the check, so we make sure that it's clear. Because a lot of the issues in the office are, you will see that 49 of the general assistance participants are homeless. So making sure that the homeless who don't have an address are receiving the warnings from our office before termination. So we saw a bump down with terminations. We saw a bump back up as people complied with what they needed to and got back on general assistance, and then we have new folks who came on. This last month was particularly large with homeless assistance. We had 22 households served. I had to note that we average 5 to 15 per month. The reason for that is a hypothesis, which it appears that our assistance really goes up right before August and right before January. And I think that's because the landlords clear out folks who have not been paying to make room for new people, and those are the time periods in a college town when people tend to start a lease. So I saw a bump in July and I've seen it now since I've been in almost 2 years. I've seen kind of regular increases. I also see, we generally see an increase over the winter. I think people become more desperate in trying to get into housing who are homeless. And so we see additional applications. In terms of general assistance, we did a significant clear out of pending applications. We usually have a number of pending applications, and we decided to end the year with 0 pending applications. So we did a major push to get a lot of folks on before the holidays. So partly because that meant more people in housing, more people receiving support during that break time when there's a lot of other services that close down. So there's a slight bump you'll see in terms of clearing out those pending applications so that GA is up some. But at this point, we still are, staying under our 125%. When we get into the financial report, you'll see we're right at 50% for general assistance this year.
Any other questions? Mary Alice?
So I think it would be helpful to include, and I think you've included this in the past, the rental assistance, eviction prevention. I think I just counted up the number of payments here. It looks like we've assisted 22 households this
That's
month.
correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's the
Oh,
memo
they're
that
homeless
you have.
assistance. Is that what the homeless assistance is?
Correct. So homeless assistance is either eviction prevention or it's getting homeless into housing. So it's rental assistance. It's both. And I typically break it up into, I'll let you know how many eviction prevention and how many homeless assistance. But I don't have those stats for this month because of intern changeover at the end of the semester. So, but I do want to generally be able to provide you so you understand how many evictions. I would say this number had a higher than average number of evictions. Typically, we see a small number of each.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Do we need a
A motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll move approval of the town fund and the general assistance fund.
moved
Second.
by Jared, second by Eric? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes. Mid-year financial report.
Yes, so I wanted to, so as requested, we would like to give quarterly reports. We gave a report a quarter ago. We were pretty much on target. I sent this out digitally on Thursday. It was with your packet. I've also printed to the best of my ability an 11 by 17. If you want to buy us a copy or that prints larger, we could do that. But
Or magnifying glass.
exactly, or maybe some magnifying glasses. But I wanted to just go over the variances. So what I did is I noted in the far right column, anytime we're over, say, 55% or so, what is that variance? Why are we over? I'm not so worried about under when it comes to expenses. I will note that in terms of our interest income, we've already made all of the interest we expected for the year, so we're doing better than average. That was because of the restructuring of our interest. We're actually looking to do that again with some of the interest rate changes. So I'm hoping to continue to see that. You'll also see we have an angel donor fund. We had, for the first time, a number of donations. We had $900 come in December. And we have a number of pledged donations. We are tax exempt, so we can provide a tax exempt letter, and there are some folks who wanted to make donations before the year for that reason. If you go down to the expenses side, I'll let the assessor answer any questions around the assessment, but the legal line, we're over because of the heavy prep for the Carl trial. That's to be expected. The audit, we're over because the audit is complete in the first quarter. Our build Urbana is significantly over, and I think that's actually a good sign. We have better than expected home sales in Urbana, so we are paying out more to the Build Urbana program than expected, and we're fine with that. If you want to continue to build homes, we're happy to receive that future income. On the docket this evening, we're asking for some additional another seat for case management software, so we're a little bit above in terms of computer software. That's primarily Visual GA, our case management software. Utilities, we have we're seeing high utility costs, and so we're actually ordering a energy audit to understand why our utility costs are so high. It's almost all gas and electric. So you'll see we're at 59% on utilities, and that's almost all the Ameren bill. Telephone and internet, we actually will probably come under budget because we converted to a much less expensive option, but we had some upfront costs in the conversion. So we're at 69% of our budget. We'll see under grants, you'll see a number of things where the grant was from last year, but it was paid out in this fiscal year. So you'll see it's at 100%. whereas most grants in this fiscal year would be at 50%. And we see that each year since we operate on a cash basis. If you go down to the program section, which is the 6,700, essentially we are scheduled to pay half of the other grants. We probably will not pay that full amount because, as you agreed to in the last meeting, we're doing 25,000 first half of the calendar year and 25,000 the second, so we'll come under. There were the work and training supplies is almost all MTD bus passes. I will say it's one of the most important things I think that we do is to provide free bus passes for folks who are in our community work program and for the homeless who don't have access. And we're actually required for anyone in our community work program, we have to provide transportation so that they can get to Salt and Light or their other host sites. Community Foundation is supposed to pay for half. There was delays in accessing those funds. So essentially, we are over budget. We also saw a much higher than expected demand for those bus passes. I actually am going to be meeting with MTD to see what we could do to kind of partner more closely on the bus pass issue. If you look at 6731 emergency assistance, and I brought this up at the quarterly report as well, this is all exclusively payments for hotel in the last fiscal year that were made in fiscal year 19. We don't expect any additional expenses here as we're not running the hotel program. And if you'll see at the very bottom, I think probably one of the most important pieces is where are we in terms of our overall expenses? We're exactly at 50%. So we're on target in terms of our budget. I was surprised by that. I thought we might be slightly under over, but we're on target with that piece. And happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Seeing no questions, do we have a report from the assessor?
Yes.
Okay. Wayne Williams.
So December was a kind of busy month for us. My office partnered with the Recorder of Deeds, Mark Sheldon, and we went out and proactively identified seniors who are eligible for the senior exemption but were not receiving it for whatever reason. And my office mailed letters to them informing them that they could apply for the senior exemption. We mailed out over 200 letters, right at about 200 letters. There were a number of people who returned it. Most people were very happy because they did not know that they were going to be eligible, and they will see a savings of about $400 to $500. Thank you. $400 to $500 next year on their property tax bill. The assessment complaints are all done. We've posted the decisions to cards, and we are in the process of scanning our cards so we can go to the transition to paperless. It's a slow process, but a necessary one. We probably have about 10% of the cards scanned, and again, I'm hoping to have all of that done by the end of the calendar year. I would like to announce that my office is pleased to welcome William Harris to our staff. He's going to fill the role of Chief Deputy. He's actually in the office right now. Will, if you can stand. William has a bachelor's degree in communication from Georgia Southern, and he brings 7 years of experience with the DeKalb County, Georgia Assessor's Office. We're in the process of completing viewing lists for 2019 assessor work in preparation to get all our numbers in by June 15th. Are there any questions?
Mary Alice.
So if I'm reading this correctly, your office is it at 38% for the year, is that right? 35
total, yes.
It's even smaller.
Yeah, so a lot of that is because we had a large chunk in administrative services, and that was supposed to assist with the conversion to our new CAMA and going paperless. We haven't incurred a lot of those expenses yet, and because we didn't go with the vendor that I thought we were going to go with when I asked for that request, and I've been working with Danielle to figure out ways to do it at a much lower cost. You know, I'm hoping not to spend anywhere near that amount of money there. As far as salaried, I have 2 student interns that are working in my office. And as you know, the chief deputy position has been vacant up until now.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you.
Bill.
When you're talking to people about the senior exemption, did you also bring up the other senior citizen options like the freeze and the potential, I guess, the kind of reverse mortgage thing they can do if they get in, if they are having trouble?
So not the reverse mortgage part, and I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. I think that's a state program that you're referring to, where where the state basically takes on the property tax liability. So that, no, we did not discuss. We did put a little blurb about the senior freeze and let people know that that was limited to income. And whenever anyone has questions, we give them assistance. And we're actually going to do our annual mailing where we mail out status forms. So the county assessor requires that everyone who receives a senior exemption, they sign a status form just so we know that they're still living in the property. So we're starting that mailing, and that's going to go out in the next couple weeks. And with that mailing, we send out the senior freeze applications.
Okay, thanks. I think I know of at least one case where that senior kind of reverse mortgage thing through the state would have probably saved a foreclosure. So I think sometimes that can be really important to prevent homelessness, and for somebody that's just going to be in their house for another 10 years or so, it could, or less, it could be a real lifesaver.
Any other questions? Eric?
Just to follow up on Bill's question or comment, is it possible to send out information about such a program with the bill?
So we don't send out the bill. We send out the assessments. Yeah. The county treasurer sends out the bill. There is information about the senior exemption on the bill, the senior freeze. And there's a box where you can check your tax bill to see if you're getting the senior freeze or senior exemption. You'd be surprised, a lot of people don't read their tax bills for whatever reason. And just to give you a couple of examples, I mean, we've had, you're eligible for the senior exemption when you're 65. Mark Sheldon and I working together, combing our databases, we found people that were in their 70s that just never applied. They just didn't know, or they thought it was automatic, or for whatever reason. And they'll be able to get it next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome, William Harris and your family. Apologies for the snowstorm that greeted you upon your arrival from Georgia.
I warned them it gets cold here.
We did, it's true, we did.
So noted. All right, is there any unfinished business? All right. Under new business is Resolution T 2019-01-001R, which is a resolution authorizing the Township Supervisor to sign an agreement for NFS Enterprises, additional visual GA license.
Yeah, I think this is to request an additional visual GA license. We have 4 seats and 6 people who use it, and you can't there's only 4 seats that can access it, and it's become essential backbone to every conversation we have with clients. And therefore, we're requesting additional seat. It was not budgeted for, but it's such an onerous situation to have people log out so that someone else can log in that I will take the budget from a different line item. We're way under on a number of items. So I'd like to move forward. It does require an additional signed agreement, so I'm required to come to you to ask for that.
Is there a motion?
Do that. I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution T-2019-01-0001R, a resolution authorizing the Township Supervisor to sign an agreement with NFS Enterprises for an additional visual GA license.
Second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. With no further business before the Cunningham Town Board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say welcome, Ms. Hersey, to the town board. We're happy to have you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay, if we're ready, I'll call to order this meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown,
Here.
Hazen. Here. Hersey,
Here.
Jacobson. Here. Miller,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
and Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Okay, we have minutes to approve from December 10th, 2018. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Eric. Any corrections, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Additions to the agenda? Any additions? Nope. Public input. I have one from Hyde O'Brien to speak on the 200 South Vine Street development. Yeah, just come on up here. Make sure the little green light on that microphone's on.
Yep, it's
Okay.
on. So I just
Pull the mic close to you so we can hear you.
I just reviewed some of the plans that were in the PowerPoint that was posted online, and as a local resident who constantly walks the sidewalks down Vine, I'm just imploring the council to require Green Street Realty to move the housing a little further off so that there is an easement that is not only commuter and pedestrian friendly, but also is safe for children, possibly include trees or green space so that the buildings don't affront to such a narrow easement, especially if Vine Street is going to remain a two-lane street. If that requires 2 units to be removed for such an option, I think that should be something the city council or the council of the whole require Green Street Realty to address. So that is really my only concern with the project. It looks like a much better improvement, and I applaud Green Street Realty for listening to the public input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. O'Brien? Okay. Also, I have one public input card from Reverend Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood. Does not wish to speak, but it's on the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem, saying we are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Okay. Any staff presentations tonight? Other than what's on the agenda? Staff report? Any staff reports? Mayor?
3 announcements. 3 announcements. The first is the community is invited to the countywide Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. annual celebration. It's this Friday, January 18th, starting at 4 o'clock at the Vineyard Church. The program starts at 5. The community is invited. The keynote speaker is Father Micah Flager from St. Sabina in Chicago. That same day in the morning is coffee with the mayor at the Urbana Free Library from 9 to 10 a.m. in the reading room in the front of the library. So the community again is welcome to come. Coffee will be provided, and you'll have an opportunity to meet with me and probably some staff members at the library. And then on tomorrow night, on Tuesday, January 15th, is the open house with information provided about the proposed development at the corner of University and Lincoln, the Gather project by the Rail Development Corporation. That's at 6:30 p.m. at St. Pat's Hall at 708 West Main Street.
Okay, thank you. Any other staff reports? Okay, first up is ordinance number 2019-01-002, an ordinance vacating an alley, Church Alley south of Elm Street between Cedar and Race Streets. Brad Bennett from Public Works.
Yes, good evening. I apologize if I'm a little sniffly tonight. I'm coming off a head cold. But what we're proposing here is a vacation of a non-functional alley that actually runs through the existing library building. So this is kind of a cleaning up the paperwork thing. We want to, right now there's currently right-of-way shown through it. We want to vacate that so that that property goes into the 2 library parcels that are there now. So it's pretty straightforward. There's no costs, in the transaction for the vacation of the right-of-way. With that, I'll open up if there's any questions.
Any questions for Brad?
I move sending this item to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Eric and seconded by Jared. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Brad. And I guess, are you doing the next one?
Yeah, I'm doing the next one
The
as
next
well.
one is ordinance number 2019-01-003, an ordinance approving a bus shelter master license agreement with the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District.
Thank you. Per the Illinois Highway Code and per city ordinance, the city can enter into license agreements with other municipal units of government for the utilization of city right-of-way. Over the years, the Mass Transit District has located bus shelters both on private property and sometimes within the public right-of-way. Some of it depends upon how much public right-of-way is available, whether they can fit in that or not. But there's a growing preference towards locating the bus shelters in the public right of way. Unfortunately, we've never had a agreement with the Mass Transit District to do that, so we've been working with them as well as the City of Champaign and the University of Illinois. Now all have agreements with the Mass Transit District to allow their bus shelters to I guess formally be within public right-of-way. There's obviously existing shelters out there that are within right-of-way. But yeah, I just want to point out maybe a couple key provisions that are included in kind of the codification of this master license agreement. We would have the plans and specifications for any new shelters, as well as the location, be reviewed and approved by the Public Works Director. If a bus shelter is proposed for a location that does not have a public sidewalk adjacent to it, that's something that MTD would agree to put in as part of the bus shelter installation. Now, I'll point out that's only for new locations. That wouldn't cover existing. It has some maintenance standards as far as what the expectations from the city are for MTD to maintain the right-of-way and the shelter around it. There's a procedure for relocation when directed by the city. If there was some construction project or some need to relocate a shelter. And then there's the usual kind of boring legal stuff of identification and insurance and right of termination. That's kind of it in a nutshell. We always write about the fiscal impacts. I'll point that out to you. The fiscal impacts on this are pretty minimal. Right now, we presently charge $80 for right-of-way permits. As part of this agreement, we would be forfeiting that charge, for the right-of-way permit. And we do typically charge private entities 85 cents per square foot of right-of-way occupation. That would be another thing that we'd be waiving as part. But I'll point out in the past, we have not charged the Mass Transit District for right-of-way permits or ever had, I think, a charge per right-of-way occupation with them.
Okay,
So
thank
that'll
you.
open up the questions. I've got Carl here from the Mass Transit District to help answer these questions or anything you wanted to add before we open it up to questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Any questions for Brad or Carl? Yep, Mary Alice.
So seeing as we had our first major snow event, I noticed in section 3.3 that there is a mention about snow removal, but there's no time frame. I believe our current ordinance only mandates that if it is announced by Public Works that it's in downtown and the Philo area, is there a rationale for not including a time or to include it in a similar manner that we have with the other businesses?
I think the only rationale is that we're more motivated to get it clear than you're motivated to have us get it cleared. So we're on it as quickly as we can. Our maintenance department gets out there and clears the shelters as it's snowing.
And right now, you only clear the shelters, right? You're not clearing the sidewalks.
That's
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yep.
I'd like
Jared.
to make a motion. I'll move ordinance number 2019-01-003, an ordinance approving a bus shelter master license agreement with the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District be forwarded to the full council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Jared and seconded by Dennis. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you, and I'd
both.
like to thank the legal division too for all their work and support of getting this agreement done.
Next is ordinance number 2019-01-004, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 8, omnibus. Finance, Don Ho.
Good evening. Before you tonight is the budget amendment number 8 for the fiscal year 2018-2019. This is a fairly routine budget amendment, except for one item. The majority of the items on this list are either rebudgets or minor budget corrections. The most significant item on this list is related to workers' compensations claims. Because the city has successfully settled several workers' comp claims during the fiscal year, this amendment would increase the budget to pay for these claims by $450,000. The money would be drawn from the fund balance of the retained risk fund. That would bring the ending fund balance to a little below $1.6 million by the end of the fiscal year. One thing to note here is that the CD annual self-insured retention limit is from $500,000 to $600,000, depending on the situation. It simply means that the city is responsible for the first $500,000 or $600,000 for workers' comp claims before insurance kicks in. Because of this, finance staff will evaluate this during the budget process and possibly come up with a plan to replenish the fund balance next fiscal year. I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding this item and other items. Elizabeth and Todd are also here to help as well.
Any questions? Jared?
So Don, this the $450,000, that's an expectation for what we may pay out this year, or things we already know we're going to pay out? Todd and Elizabeth answer.
Todd.
Okay.
I'll
Tag
jump
team.
in, and Todd can help. So periodically, Todd and I review together with our third-party administrator for workers' comp claims, the status of all the claims. And in a recent review, we looked at all the claims that may potentially settle before the end of the fiscal year, because it appeared to me that the budget wasn't going to be sufficient. And so that's the estimated amount that that they believe will settle before the end of the fiscal year. Some of them may go longer, but they're generally pretty aggressive about trying to settle.
Is this in addition to an amount we passed in the budget?
Yes, correct.
How much did we pass prior to this $450,000?
215.
215
I think it's 250.
or 250?
Yeah, so the original budget, correct, was 250, so this would bring it to 700,000.
Okay, thanks.
So this is just for the record, it's a number of smaller claims. It's not one large claim.
Okay.
Eric?
So do you have a sense, maybe this is an impossible question to answer accurately, but do you have a sense as to whether this is a trend or an accidental or a random bump this year?
I think it's very predictable to determine how long these claims will take to process from beginning to end. There are a couple of variables. You have to reach maximum medical improvement, or the individual who's injured has to reach that first. And so that can, based upon the factors of the injury, that can be anywhere from a month to a year and a half. I mean, it can take quite a bit of time. But then once you actually settle that portion of it, then the lawyers get involved. So first it's the doctors, and then it's the lawyers who get involved. And then they work together to try and determine the appropriate amount of the claim based upon the statutory criteria. And so there's quite a bit of variability on the length of the claims, and it makes it very hard to predict from year to year. So last year we spent, I think it was, what, 191,000 or something to that, around there.
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah, but before that, it was. I think the year before that, it was maybe a little over twice that amount. So it just ebbs and flows. And for instance, in this year, in the claims that we're looking at, a couple of them. One of them is about over 2.5 years old. The other is close to that. And so it's just there can be quite a bit of lag time for some of these claims, and they can get solved in a clump. And then you can go a while and get somewhat of a stabilization or a reduction in the overall amount. So it just depends on the year. So it's hard to predict.
I have one for the 500 to 600,000 insurance coverage. Is that per incident or per year?
It's per incident.
Per incident.
And it's 500,000 for non-public safety, and then 600,000 for public safety is.
And that's not an insurance limit, it's a self-insured retention limit, so that we pay everything up to
Right, so it's
500
like
or
a floor.
600 before the insurance takes over.
Okay. Any other questions? Mary Alice?
I have two questions that aren't related to workman's comp. So, Don, my first question is, it would be helpful, and I recognize that it might be challenging to have, at the end of the day, what is the general fund balance and the difference between what we had budgeted versus what we're now doing with these different omnibus. I think that would be helpful. I realize that we're talking $1,000, but you look at $450,000 and your eyes perk up. So that would be number one. My number two is the landscape recycling. I realize that we are moving around things that perhaps weren't charged in the previous fiscal years. I'm curious, does that mean that we have broken even, we're in deficit, or we've made money in the landscape recycling fund?
So this is for, for different department at the city, we use the landscape recycling center, and the LRC center does charge back to the cities, and these are called interdepartmental charges. We didn't have these last year, so that's why these transfer or charge didn't get charged to the account last year. So we're trying to put this into this year's budget and to recognize those as interdepartmental charges.
So this is revenue, not expense? At the end of the day, I realize it's going back and forth between funds.
This is revenue for the LRC,
right,
with
exactly.
charges for the departments.
Okay, thank you.
But there is, for the record, as part of the budget process, we'll be taking a bigger picture look at the LRC fund and whether it's sustainable financially over the long term.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no more questions, is there a motion?
I'll move to send this budget adjustment to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Eric and seconded by Jared. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Next is ordinance number 2019-01-005, an ordinance approving a redevelopment agreement with Green Street Realty Company of Illinois and authorizing the sale of certain real estate, 200 block of South Vine Street, 300 block of East Green Street. Community Development. Brandon. Oh, okay, and the mayor's going to start with a little presentation.
No, it's
or a statement or something.
I just wanted to start off this conversation with a thank you to the many people who have gotten this project to this point. It's been actually years in the making. So I wanted to shout out to our economic development staff, Brandon Boyes, Libby Horowitz, Will Kolchowski, plus our planning and engineering staff, finance. Really, every department in the city has had a hand in getting this project to the point that it is. I'd also like to thank Green Street Realty, Chris Saunders and his team for working very closely with us, for actually submitting a proposal and working closely with the city and responding to the comments and feedbacks from the community. And finally, a special thanks to the community members who attended the the meeting we held last fall, plus who have submitted comments, and city council members as well who have provided feedback on this proposal. I think the project has evolved in a way that reflects the community concerns and input, and we're pleased to be at this point. So I'll turn this over to Carol.
As the mayor said, this is an important sort of milestone decision point for this project. And Brandon and Libby are going to make a presentation that sort of walks us through some of the background, including the history of prior proposals for this site, the RFP, the LOI, the design feedback we got on October 23rd at our public meeting, and the response to that, and then the framework of the agreement that we have before us and the fiscal impact. And then I think Chris Saunders may have something that he wants to share as well. And so we're hoping to get through all of that and then handle questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to start with a quick overview of the site. The site is currently city-owned. It is located west of Vine Street, east of Urbana, north of Green Street, and south of Elm. Currently on the property is a vacant former Goodyear tire building, a city parking lot, and vacant land. The city first issued an RFP for the site in 2011. The resulting proposal was a 7-story mixed-use building called the Metro Center. Ultimately, the project did not go through as it was financially unfeasible. In 2015, the city partnered with brokerage firm CBRE to issue the second RFP for the site. The city selected TWG out of Indianapolis to develop the property into a high-density apartment building. During this time, the property was rezoned to B4, and TWG held a neighborhood design meeting in which the neighborhood gave input to the design that they wanted at the site. The project once again did not go through because it was not financially feasible. In 2018, the city issued a third RFP for the site. This time, the city changed the request slightly to include medium to high density townhome and residential development in the request. There were 7 potential developers that the city talked with, over 50 times between those 7 developers. 2 developers submitted proposals, and the city selected Green Street Realty. They selected Green Street Realty due to the project layout, the project timeline, as well as the financial feasibility with the project. The city entered into a letter of intent with Green Street Realty in September of 2018. Included in that letter of intent was a preliminary design. The letter of intent also had the developer agree to seek public comment as well as revise the preliminary design. And that resulted in a final design, which is attached in the redevelopment agreement. Shown here is the initial design as attached in the original letter of intent. After public feedback, this is the changed final design that is included in the agreement. Please note that this is the final design, but it still has to go through the city's development review process to ensure that the final project plans meet city code. So after public feedback, there were elements that were kept from the original design. This included the layout of the exterior buildings with the interior parking. Also, the floor plans and the square footage was largely kept the same. There were major design changes as well. The public indicated that they wanted a more urban design that better incorporated the materials that are found in downtown Urbana. Brick was added to the first 2 stories of the building, and EFS on the 3rd story of the building. There was an increased setback and planters along Vine Street. Also, the roof line was changed from more of a sloped roof line to a flat roof line, and larger windows were included. The height of the building was also changed, where previously it was more of a varied 2 and 3 throughout. The 2-story buildings were placed closer to Urbana, with the 3-story buildings on Vine Street, and that's to account for the residential as well as the downtown feel. Green space was added to the center with a dog park and covered bike parking. And after the public indicated they wanted sustainability features, solar panels were added to the covered parking for use in the common area. So to summarize, the final design includes a minimum of 23-story units and 22-story units, a minimum of 25 surface parking lots, spaces, enclosed garage parking spaces on the ground floor of a minimum of 15 units, building exteriors comprised of brick, woodboard, and exterior insulation finishing systems, sufficient setbacks along adjacent streets to ensure pedestrian and resident safety, at least 20% of the units having the ability to be adapted for upper story ADA accessibility as required by code, and covered bicycle parking with an active solar array. The updated final design is included in the agreement, and the project must be substantially in accordance with the project design exhibited in the agreement. However, the remainder of the design details are to be worked out in the design review process, and the project must be fully in accordance with city code.
Thanks, Libby. So I'm going to go over some of the other provisions in the agreement. Most of this was already outlined in the letter of intent. Very little changed throughout the process. So the agreement would obligate the developer to participate with 20% equity, and the project needs to be performed at a minimum cost of $5 million. The start date was pushed back a little from the original letter of intent to start by April of 2019, with the intent to have the project fully completed by 2020. Although I think Green Street's stated goal is to try to get to achieve leasing in August of 2020. The agreement also would require committing to aspirational goals for the hiring of minority and women-owned contractors. The city will achieve this through working with a consultant, which will be a cost of about $10,000. We've already had a preliminary meeting with the consultant and Green Street's team to start some initial introductions to possible contractors to work with. The final agreement will require the developer to serve as a management agent for the project for a period of 5 years. And as has been stated before, it's the developer's responsibility through this agreement to pay for site preparation costs of all those noted, including demolition of the building that's there currently. The agreement provides for incentives. The sale of the property, which is valued about $1 million, would be sold at $1. But the developer is providing a personal guarantee that the project will be completed, as is described in the agreement. After project completion, the project would become eligible for rebates of incremental property taxes. So 100% of new taxes being rebated in the first year, and then it stair steps down. That's identical stair step to the Think Urbana program that townhomes are otherwise eligible for. In the enterprise zone, it's an abatement, not a rebate, but that's the tool we have here is TIF. So it's being offered as a rebate, but it's not a greater incentive than other developers can achieve elsewhere in Urbana. The project is also expected to qualify for sales tax exemption certificates because it is a townhome project, and our enterprise zone will allow for that. The fiscal impact starts with the fact that the property is currently has no assessed value. It's not generating any property taxes. So once that property is sold to a private owner, and then of course when the value is increased from the project, it'll start generating incremental property taxes for the central TIF district. So that means all new taxes will accrue to the TIF fund. That'll be about so initially over those first 5 years, we'll rebate back about $450,000 of the total $3.4 million we anticipate prior to the end of the life of TIF, the central TIF, in 2040. So by 2030, we expect that the central TIF fund will have recouped an equivalent amount of revenue to the approximate value of the property itself. So that's from a value perspective, the break-even point. And then by the end of the life of the TIF, there'll be a net $3 million in the TIF fund of new revenue. And I guess that concludes my overview. But importantly, this would be the first new residential project for downtown Urbana in the past 13 years. So in addition to, generating roughly $3 million in revenue for the TIF district, we are selling a property, but the city's also gaining a lot of input, and we've provided that opportunity for residents to have that input to control the outcome of the development for this site in a manner that we think is consistent with the city's goals, but also the public's interest. And I think we're going to turn things over to Chris Saunders now of Green Street Realty.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris Saunders, Green Street Realty. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for the time. I do want to reiterate what Diane said. It's been a very good experience for me as well as on the development side, dealing with the city staff, especially Brandon and Libby and Diane and her team have been great. We've really spent a lot of time on this, really pre even submitted anything, just getting ideas from the very first meeting and being able to get feedback, take feedback, and really think of all the things that that people brought us. We had a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback on people excited about a development happening in downtown Urbana. Even though some people didn't love the original look of the design we did originally, there was a lot of positive feedback on this was the type of project that we thought that would be successful. So that was good. We did our best to kind of take a lot of the feedback. Luckily, a lot of the feedback was very similar on, I guess we were a little surprised. We thought it would be the opposite, that people were thinking residential. We want a residential feel here. And really a lot of the feedback we got is that we wanted to kind of really fit into downtown Urbana and be more of an urban feel and less of maybe a single family type look. So we did, just to kind of go through this packet, and I will mention a couple things. A lot of times renderings are renderings. They don't give you really a feel of what this might look like. My point being, I believe that it's going to look a lot better with real materials than just on a picture right now. So, we tried to take a lot of if you can kind of see the main kind of courtyard there in our main picture. We are limited a little bit on this design to the site and the size of the site and how much green space we can have in the middle of it while still achieving parking. So we did try to expand that from our original plan and put an area where people can actually enjoy the area and maybe get out of their apartment and be able to have some green space. And if you have a pet, be able to kind of walk your dog and kind of get some of our essential inside services, our trash area, just kind of a nice little common courtyard area. If you go down to kind of the main view, this would be along Vine Street. A lot of the feedback we received was to push the the property forward more towards the street, similar like you'd see in downtown Urbana. And that's kind of where we came up with this idea, pushing it forward. We also came up with the idea at one point of adding planter boxes, and I can't remember where that came from, but those type of things are all things that can change if the planter boxes aren't the way to go, and we want other kind of landscaping there. We like the idea along Vine Street being more up towards the street like you'd have as you go downtown Urbana. Along the other three streets, we've got a setback with some grass and trees that would go along those areas, and you can probably see that more. This is a view kind of along Vine Street again with the planter box idea. This would be the back. The back side, one of the feedback items we received from several different people were they thought maybe step this down from a 3-story back to a 2-story along the residential neighborhoods in the back, and we went ahead and did that. Actually, we like the way it looks. Doing the 2 stories in the back just give a lot more of a neighborhood feel in the back side of the property and fit in pretty well with everything that continues back as you go all the way back, all the way to Cottage Grove in that neighborhood. There's a lot of 2-story type properties. So it seemed to fit in well with those. So that's kind of where we came up with the backside. Along that backside, we do have a setback, more grass along the area between the property and the sidewalk. This would be kind of a straight-on view again on Vine Street. We made the windows bigger, added more brick. This would be a corner view, kind of giving you that feel of looking at it where you're able to see the step down in height from the 3-story to the 2-story properties on the side there. Again, another back view. This would be a view kind of facing the side street. We've got 2 entrances, main entrances on this for traffic, and those are both on the the Green Street and it would be Elm Street side. We just thought that would be a lot better than trying to come out onto the main thoroughfare of Vine Street. We think this is going to, be a easy way for people to access the property still and not cause, big traffic congestion in the area. This is a back view. We're still, working on, the idea was to vary the materials in the back. I don't think this does a great job of showing how it will look in the end, but the idea was not have it be one long plane of the same color of materials, just to break it up, even in the inside of the project. So if you're inside looking, it still has some character. Again, this is the idea of the courtyard view. We do have brought some solar panels into this and some, using some of that energy on this area, along with some grass and just kind of common area space. Again, you can kind of get an idea of the pass-throughs between the building and the garages. These will be unique properties just because of the size of the units. The trend in development right now, especially really everything student and regular multifamily development, is small units. And these are much, much larger than we typically have built by several hundred square feet. So these are definitely more of a residential type unit. I mean, our 3 bedrooms are nearly 1,700 square feet with garages, and that's going to be, I think, a super attractive feature for a family or a professional type or a graduate student. But we like that size. It just differentiates it in the market. Going to make them, I believe, very a very exciting option for people that haven't had that in the past. Again, a backyard kind of view, and then our overview of the project. Just this gives you a breakdown of the type of units. Really, it's almost all 3s in the front. It is all 3s in the front and 2s in the back. We've got about a 50-50 mix of 3s and 2s in the project. Then our floor plans are, like I said, our floor plans really did not change significantly at all when we changed the design of these from the townhouse look with the pitched roofs. The floor plans stayed really the same along the way. So we got a 2-story with no balcony. We've got a 3-story with a garage and a balcony, a 2-story with a balcony. So both models have balconies, and the 3 stories, a lot of those have garages. So that is, kind of the layout, several different floor plans. I'm here for any questions. I know I met with several council members one-on-one on this project, and would love any feedback now that we've shared it with everybody, just what feedback we might have. And again, mention that we're very excited about the project, and being an Urbana resident myself, I see a lot of positive things going on right now in Urbana, and hopefully this will kickstart a movement for more happening in downtown and giving more foot traffic in this immediate area.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Dean.
I have a question for city staff, I guess. Regarding the $10,000 for the consultant fee, it's not my intent here to start a debate on affirmative action or all the subjects that includes that we've heard about for so long here on council, but my question is more of, we have an economic development department, we have a human resources department and human relations staff. Do we need to spend $10,000 to hire an outside consultant to monitor your guys' hiring or Green Street Realty's hiring practices? Can't we do that ourselves?
Can I just address that? So this is in line with the discussion that we've had a couple of times about the mayor council priorities, and that it takes resources to advance those priorities. The gentleman that we've been working with specializes in counseling developers about how to do this type of hiring, how to introduce them to the companies that we want to promote, and has relationships with these companies. And so each project that we use this consultant for has sort of a customized approach. And given that the goals are at this point are aspirational, it really does need some dedicated resources. So it's not a monitoring thing. It's really an educational process. It's an investment of time on both parties' side, and we need outside help to do that, and it's specialized help. But as we talked about in the priority discussion, it doesn't happen for free.
Okay.
Dennis.
So can I ask then, is our staff not qualified to offer that services? And you're talking about a consultant, but you're talking about a consultant that is centered in Champaign-Urbana? Or are they from outside?
I'm going to let Brandon tell you about this individual's qualifications, but
what about our own staff's qualifications?
I want you to understand this individual's qualifications. They don't have the specialized, our staff does not have the specialized expertise of this individual, but we also don't have the bandwidth to do this in a robust fashion in order to get results. So we would need the help, even if we had the specialized help on staff. At the moment, we don't have the bandwidth for it. So Brandon, can you tell about Mr. Coleman's expertise?
Yes, we worked with Dr. Fred Coleman on the Cohen building agreement to date, which is a renovation of an existing building. So the way this generally works is we go in, we work with the developer to set expectations of what the project cost is going to be, and then Dr. Coleman uses his expertise to assess what the developer's doing, what trades are going to be involved, discusses how bids are put out there, and discusses strategies with the developer for maximizing minority and women-owned participation in those bids. And that sometimes rolls up into some changing how construction management may have occurred in the past. We don't have construction management expertise in-house for private housing projects or for historic renovations. Really, unless it was a streets project, I'm not sure that we are going to find the in-depth knowledge we'd need to really make sure that this interaction that a private developer is having with city staff is worthwhile. Our goal has always been, because these are aspirational goals, we can't necessarily enforce these from a purely numerical standpoint. Our goal is to have effective communication, education, and see a change in meaningful behavior and best practices in the developers we work with. And we hope that Green Street Realty learns something in the process so they can bring these practices to future projects, in addition to staff being able to tell council from an informed perspective that the aspirational goals that were set for the project were consistent with the availability of contractors in the market and the requirements for the project itself.
Jared.
Go ahead, Dean. Oh, I just wanted to ask, has this been done before, this outside consulting thing? Because this is the first I've heard of it.
For the Cohen building redevelopment agreement.
No, I mean, has it been used before for any private projects like this, or any married projects with the city?
Not prior to those recent, or this agreement which is proposed, and the Cohen building redevelopment agreement at Race and Main downtown. But,
so I guess I'm wondering, why are we starting this now? And Green Street Realty has built a lot of things, so he's not an unknown. I mean, we know his background. Where'd this come from? It just kind of seemed out of the blue to me. But
this was a priority for the city, was my understanding.
I agree.
Per this body, that was actually this language was introduced in the request for proposals when we started this whole process. So it's been in the letter of intent, and now it's here in the development agreement.
I mean, if you're asking why is this the first project that Green Street Realty is being approached in order to do this, we have to have, the city has to have some stake in the relationship in order to introduce this, unless somebody wants to do it proactively. The idea here is, you know, if we are able to introduce Chris Saunders to some people who are, you know, minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses, and they develop a relationship, that relationship would actually go beyond just this project.
Okay, Jared.
So, Brandon, I don't know if I caught something in there. Were you saying that at the end of the project, perhaps we'll see some kind of report about the effectiveness of us achieving the goals? Is that what you were alluding to?
Yes, I mean, the developer has to, per the agreement, has to report those aspirational goals, and in order for staff to evaluate those, that those are appropriate aspirational goals, that's where the expertise of the consultant and the legwork takes place. So, yes, we would evaluate how the developer performs on those aspirational goals, and also, again, looking at the best practice or good faith efforts of the developer in pursuit of that goal. There's a story to tell after the fact about the experience, what was learned from it, as well as how do we do on the goal itself.
Okay. It's just, you know, it's always good to see if we're being effective with our uses of resources. So seeing it at the end result, I think we'll probably all still be on council at that time. The completion of the project, it'd be interesting to have a look and say, okay, well, this is what we did. We hired what was the gentleman's name?
Dr. Fred Coleman is whom we worked with for the Cohen Building project, and we tend to approach him for this, but we're under no obligation to do so at this point, and haven't reached an agreement with Dr. Coleman either. So
Okay. But anyway, if we do hire Dr. Coleman, then we can look back and say, okay, well, here's what he did, here's what he said, here's what actually happened, and the conditions and circumstances under which it happened. Will we be likely to see something similar to this in the future? For if the city's involved in other projects, where I guess it's involved with sale of city property and stuff like that.
I mean, that depends on the continued guidance of the council and mayor. At this time, staff intends to continue to include this provision in the agreements and continue to develop our capabilities and our ability to assess and carry out these kinds of obligations.
Awesome. Well, I hope it is fortuitous.
Other questions? Eric?
So I apologize if I missed this, but are there results available for the Cohen Building project with respect to these particular goals?
They have announced that they have signed a lease for a tenant, a Japanese restaurant, but they have not conducted a full phase of the project yet. There have been no reimbursements, although there has been a lot of effort on the front end of working with the developer, introduction to contractors, assessing the work. But we would wait to provide a report until after at least one of the phases is completed.
If I could pursue one other item. All those flat roofs are going to have a lot of sunshine on them. And it would be a terrible waste if we didn't at least make this project solar ready during the construction, because retrofitting would be much more expensive. So, how about that?
Well, I had a feeling you might mention that, so which is great. We did meet with several different solar experts, learning, you know, and it obviously is a trend right now of growing. It's becoming more and more affordable. It still was not feasible at this time to actually put the solar panels everywhere, but we do think we can put the conduits in and make it solar ready. So that part's in the future. If prices continue to go down, it might be the next flat screen TV for all we know here in a few years. And we're going to try to make this. We're going to try to put the conduits in place to make that job easier in the future. Should we convert or add solar energy to this? So we as of this morning, we weren't sure that we've made had some conversations, and I believe we can do that. So it would have that ability.
Well, that'll be great. And I think your reasoning from a business point of view is probably right, because you've got a bottom line to meet, and you've got to meet market value for these things. And the trend lines for the solar panels, they're getting a lot. They will be almost certainly a lot cheaper in, let's say, 5 years than they are now. So
yeah, we like the idea, the concept behind it. I think on this project, along with all the projects that we do or any developer struggles with, is there's ultimately a value to it. There's a rent level that even if we think we can get more or whatever it might be, there's an ultimate value, and for us to go out and get a loan on the project and build it, we're going to be kind of limited to where that ultimate value is. So we always look at those things when we go down a road of promising, certain finishes and things like that. We're no different than anybody. I want the best finishes we can possibly put on these projects, and we're always limited by, unfortunately, the cost, and cost in construction is certainly not going down any. But I think your request to make them at least ready for future use, and I do agree with you. I think that future could be a lot sooner than we think, and it would be a good marketing. We believe having it there is good for the project. It's just right now when we looked at what it would cost per unit to put it in and what it would actually achieve from a use, how much of it would actually benefit on a meter for a tenant. It's not as big as we thought it might be either. You're not getting 90%. You're not getting rid of your electric bill, but you're saving a lot of money over a long period of time. Just a lot of capital on the front end to put it in.
I'm glad that they'll at least be ready.
Yeah,
Right.
they'll be ready to roll. Yeah.
Therese.
I'm the new kid on the block.
Yes, welcome.
So I do have one question, just looking at your design. I didn't see any space for children.
In the apartments, there's a lot of space. There are 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. We're limited a little bit on this
Outside.
site, and this has got one of the challenges of this site is the power pole that runs through this lot and right through the building. With our discussions with Ameren, it's literally almost impossible to just pick that up and move it and do something with it, because it literally runs all of downtown Urbana, including the Schnooks and everything else. And burying it was somewhere in the, to take it down and try to bury that is somewhere in the mid to upper 6-figure type, maybe $750,000 if it could be done. And so we've got to kind of design around that a little bit, and we're also designing around the idea that this project's on a courtyard, and we've got to fit in an adequate amount of parking, because we do expect young families and having parking there. And
Yeah,
green
it's just-
space is going to be.
I just noticed, you had dog play, but not baby play.
Yeah, the dog play thing's up in the air a little bit, but that's the idea. We're trying to fit something in there. It maybe it's playground equipment, or those things can certainly be negotiated. We'd love to see people walk down to Victory Park down the street too and enjoy those. It's a very easy walk from here to get to that park, which we hope is another amenity for this particular project. But yeah, we're a little limited there, but I agree with you. It'd be nice to have more things there. We're looking at that. We certainly can consider that in the final kind of design of that courtyard area.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mary Alice.
All right, so I have 10 questions.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
I've listed them down here. I will go as quickly as possible. I'll start with the easy ones. So setback on Vine. You heard today that there was a question about sidewalk space. So what is the proposed setback?
I don't believe there is one that's required.
There is not. B4 doesn't require any.
Yeah. We don't want it right on top of the sidewalk where a door opens up and you're right there. But the doors will all swing inside too by code, I believe. So it's not like doors are going to be flying out to the sidewalk. But we are also challenged, like I mentioned, we're making this in basically a U, and we've already got a pretty established set of power lines running down here, which we can work around pretty easily. We've set it up that way. The more we step back off Vine and go that way, we're shrinking that ability. We're going to lose some units there. So we want to be up towards Vine, but if that's a flower box away or a little bit of grass away, we're open to that. We're going to try to keep it up near there, but a lot of the feedback we received last time was we want it like downtown. We want to be on the sidewalk, and that's kind of where that came from.
Let me rephrase. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah.
So, Urbana Street, what is the proposed setback on
I
Urbana?
believe we're doing like 10, like a typical setback, 10 to
15 is
yeah,
typical
10 to
for
15,
R5.
yeah. We show that green space. If you go up to the, you kind of see there where the sidewalk's at and where the building's at. So on 3 of the 4 sides, we do show a pretty decent, amount of space with still maximizing the site to get enough units in there that we need to make the project work. But we do plan on having grass and trees and things.
Sidewalk, grass.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then let's see here. What else is easy here? Brandon, can you explain how the rebates work?
The rebates, after the project is completed and assessed, then the developer pays their taxes like normal. Because it's in a TIF district and because the base value was 0, all the new taxes come to the TIF district. So in the first year, we will rebate 100% of those taxes back to the developer. And then the second year, 80%, 60%, 40%, 20%.
Okay, so I guess my confusion with that is this. So the city only gets, 14 or 16% of the property tax, but we're going to rebate 100% of it. Does that mean that the school district gets their over 50%?
In the TIF fund, none of the taxing bodies per se receive any of the taxes. It's received by the TIF district, and the city manages that fund as a fiduciary for all the taxing bodies. The council makes those decisions ultimately on behalf of all the taxing bodies. So that additional $3 million in revenue that would be coming in over the remainder of the life of the TIF district, ultimately the city has the option of reinvesting that money into the TIF district, either in public infrastructure, other incentives, other programs, but it becomes a part of the TIF fund and a part of the TIF program.
Okay, so basically, if they were paying 100% of the property tax, it still would go into the TIF, and the other taxing bodies wouldn't receive their percentage.
Not immediately.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then the $10K that we've been talking about in terms of the consultant, is that going to be paid out of the TIF funds?
Yes, it's an eligible expense.
Okay, and then is that a flat rate or is it an hourly rate?
That is an estimate, and as I mentioned, there is no agreement at this time.
Is it typically an hourly rate or is it typically a flat rate?
Typically an hourly rate.
Okay. I'm curious, Mr. Sanders, thank you very much for coming and also for committing to do this project. Right now, I know that you guys do a lot of building in this community, so you probably have standard crews that you use.
Well, we've got so much work, in the neighborhood of about $200 million worth of construction we're starting over the next 2 years. We use a lot of different subs because a lot of the subs we can't use the same sub over and over again on jobs. So we do use a variety of different subcontractors.
So what percentage would you anticipate using existing people that you've used in the past?
I mean, I think we'll continue. We've got good relationships with a lot of, I would say a good percentage, but we're also looking for new subcontractors to use. We don't use very many subcontractors that are out of the area, meaning central Illinois. We do use contractors that are in Bloomington, Normal, and Peoria. We try to stay, a lot of our subs are local in this central Illinois area and locally in Champaign, Urbana.
All right. And then I can stop and pause and let other people ask questions. Or I can continue.
Dennis.
Yeah. So thank you very much also for Chris for really addressing a lot of the issues that came up. I had quite a few myself personally with you, and you were very receptive to them, and I see that the design has changed quite a bit and answers a lot of them. We had a possibility for a thorough public review of the plan of the first design that you did, but to date, we haven't had an opportunity to have a public hearing and a feedback session for this new design. And because it's quite different, I think it's important to have a chance for the public to be introduced to it in a formal way and to respond to it more than just having it occur a few minutes before a final vote is done by the city council, which it seems to be maybe is how we're kind of working it out so far. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to have a public presentation and delay the vote of the city council by 2 weeks.
To answer your question there, I mean, I think tonight's open for anybody to be here. I don't know if there's going to be any other comments afterwards. We've already pushed this project quite a bit. The goal initially was to be over on the site right now, actually demoing and working on when we had weather. We're really under it. I think it was mentioned earlier in one of your other presentations about we're in a college town, and a lot of the leases and time frames are kind of on this August schedule. We delivered Carlton Fields Building 1 recently in October, and we had everybody wanting to rent it if we were done in August. And we fear pushing this back. There's a lot of other factors involved. There's economic pressures right now of delaying anything on the project, rising rates, things along those lines that might change our feeling of being able to do this or other projects. So the timing of it really is important for us to get this done. We have not engaged our architect at all right now. They've done nothing. They've done the pretty renderings. They've done unit layouts. But there is 6 to 8 to 10 weeks of full drawings, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineers that need to look at this stuff, structural people, and get the plans done, turn them over to John and his team, and they've got another few weeks to review those and finally get us to the point where we can actually start construction. So right now we have that at April 1 to kind of meet one of our goals, which would be to try to get maybe a portion of this opened in the fall of 19. The longer we push that, we're then fighting up against winter conditions and weather and everything else, and then we maybe push it even another, we might look at doing spring of 20 start, which then throws off our timelines. And I'm concerned, developer who's looking, loves to build in Champaign-Urbana, and I'm all for it, but we're looking at other markets as well, and we're looking at competition and the number of new projects that are coming to this market and other markets. And obviously I've got concerns that something else just happens to pop up. It might change our economics and whether we want to do it. So I kind of want to be the first one in and going, and we're ready to go on this project. We're ready to engage architects, sign the contract, and go. And we did receive a good amount of feedback at the first meeting. I was a little shocked to see that a lot of the people did not show up tonight. I know it was pretty well publicly announced again, and but yeah, I really would not like to do that. I'm not saying if you guys vote, that's what you want to do, but it really would put a dent in what we're trying to do timeline-wise.
Okay, well, thank you for a very frank answer. I want to ask a couple other questions. It wasn't really easy to tell from the schematics whether the courtyard would have 2 stories of brick on the interior courtyard, or was that some other material?
We're looking at EFIS. Actually, the inside of that is likely the kind of hardy board type material. It's going to be, it's a wood. I think I showed you in our office. It's a very expensive product. Actually, we just bid it on another site, and it was not cheap. Yeah, we plan on using that product and that inside of there. It's a wood.
Yeah, so there's not really brick facing on the interior.
I don't think we have brick right now planned for the inside of the project. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did get quite a few questions from one of my constituents who has very thoughtful comments. She was also concerned about the setback. I've already stated here in council that it would be really great to be able to have some trees along Vine Street, because it would create kind of a boulevard effect, and I think that's a handsome way of having an urban development. So I don't know if it's possible to maybe stagger some, maybe like 6 or 7 of the units back a couple of feet for allowing that, or if you've planned for having planters, is it possible to put trees in the planters up against the building, or would they need to be moved to the curb?
Yeah, to answer that, I'd say our setbacks on 3 of the 4 sides are typical setbacks, 10, 15 feet that you'd see in most developments. The front's going to be difficult. I think a lot of the feedback, and the reason it's like that is just because that was the main feedback we got before, is we wanted up against the sidewalk. I worry about trees and then, getting in the sidewalk, way of the sidewalk, if they're going to grow, and what we'd put there to keep them from being a nuisance to people walking down Vine Street and the sidewalk. But
And so then, Brandon, what is the passable width of the sidewalk then, if there were going to be planters against the building, which would obviously not be a place to walk then?
I don't think that changes the sidewalk. We just had planters between the building and where the sidewalk would be a typical sidewalk like there is now.
So what's the width of the sidewalk?
I'm not sure the exact width, but council should know the city has very little right-of-way to be working with on either side of Vine Street. The right-of-way stops where the sidewalk stops currently. It's not a particularly wide sidewalk. So the details of this would be worked out in the development review process internally involving community development and public works staff. And so ideas about and also after the developer has had the opportunity to have the architect and the engineers really have detailed drawings. At that point, they can make determinations at that time and negotiate about how to best handle the right-of-way for safety purposes and also for any beautification that's possible. But it's very hard to make any determination about this based on a conceptual drawing.
We have not engaged a civil engineer as of yet. That would be one of these items that we engage after, if we get approval. We would go forward with all those departments, and that would be one of the laying the project out would be step one to the scale of the lot, based on a survey.
So I would like to say that if it's possible to put trees along the boulevard of Vine Street, it would be beautiful. I do appreciate the fact that there's possibility, and it's been indicated on the drawings that there's going to be trees along the other sides.
Yep, absolutely.
My constituent also asked about pedestrian safety at the crosswalk there, but that's really a city problem and has to do with more of the street than you can't control that. I wanted to ask about converting the dwellings for accessibility. Right now, there aren't any ADA compliant accessible two-story or three-story units. Is that correct? You don't really
Well,
expect
you wouldn't
that?
build them that way. They all have to be adaptable. I believe it's 20% of a project like this has to be handicap adaptable. So they'll be adaptable. That'll be a code review item that we could, whether we're Green Street or TWG or anybody else, those are items that are required by the building code. So we have to offer accessible units that are adaptable. You don't build them that way to start with, but they're adaptable for somebody that would like to lease them. And I believe the number on the project like this type of construction is 20%. But
So that's a generous number, but if you were going to be adapting it, and if you were in a wheelchair, who would then pay for the elevator to take you to the second story?
There's a whole lot of code issues on that. The adaptability code, you'd have to read it, I believe. It changes based on when it's built and when the tenant comes in. I don't have that all memorized because it's different for each project. But yeah, that's usually a cost on the front end that if somebody came to us, we've done this on campus many times where they are going to rent a building from us and we need to make some adaptable changes to them for their needs. That's something that we would do on the front end of this. But I can't quote Illinois accessibility code to you. It's pretty lengthy. But
so
we're bound to whatever those rules are.
Okay, so that if maybe one or two tenants in the first rental or leasing a program were interested in moving in and they had accessibility problems, you would retrofit or you would prepare one or two units for them?
We would do whatever code requires us to do, yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily be the burden of the individual who wants to move in?
Again, I'd have to read the code. I'm not an accessibility expert, but we are bound to whatever everybody else is on the Illinois accessibility code.
Okay. So Brandon, would you know how to answer that question?
No, I would defer to our building safety staff in particular, and also note that I think we need plans for them to make a full determination. But John Schneider's here and could maybe offer a few words.
And I guess I'm wondering is that there's some space, maybe it's a closet or a corner that you've sort of seen that it could be used.
Yeah, they've accounted for that in these drawings. They know that the architects know where those are at because we had that laid out, I think, the first time around. There is a way to do that. That's been thought of. Right now, this is just a schematic rendering.
Okay,
but
right.
they'll be in the plans. We have to show anything that's adaptable. That's typical in all the new construction, whether it's a 7-story building or a 2-story building. You've got, those are items that have to be shown, whether they're balconies that show platforms that go in them. There's a lot of things that have adaptability, and it's, John might be able to tell you exactly what it is.
Okay, so I don't know, maybe you can enlighten me on that.
Well, I don't know that I can enlighten you completely. It changes depending on what the need is. That's a very important component of it, because not every person who is dealing with a disability or needs adaptability is in a wheelchair. You know, there might be other issues that they have to deal with, and typically our code staff works with the property owner. In this case, because the property, our ordinance, our adopting ordinance provides, because the property is being provided as part of the development project by the city, then the project has to be visitable, and that's a little bit different, and those requirements are called out in the code: 0-step entries, you know, a little bit wider doors and things like that. But during the, like Chris said, during the review of the plans, we would determine whether that meets that criteria or not.
It's kind of a hard question too, because there's many building types, and it changes really based on the building type, and there's a lot of different types. And I don't want to say one thing and be wrong on it, because I don't know, but we certainly will go through that whole process. It's not something we can change, really. It's out of our control on what's going to be required.
Okay, so thank you then.
Yeah, no problem.
Any others? Any other questions before we go back to Mary Alice? Okay, Mary Alice.
All right. So some of this stuff is legal. So I'm curious, this agreement is with Green Street Realty. Does that mean that for 5 years, is that the term that they have to manage the property? Is that correct? I'm looking at you, Jim. I can find the page because I highlighted it if you want me to find the page. Page 8.
I don't have the agreement memorized, but.
What?
That sounds correct. 5 years is.
Section 5.4.
I was going to say, I believe they have an obligation to manage it for 5 years.
But do they have an obligation to own it for 5 years?
It says manage.
Okay, so Mr. Saunders could finish building this and then sell it to somebody, but continue to manage it for 5 years, and that would be legal under this agreement?
Theoretically, unless there's another provision elsewhere in the agreement.
Okay.
I believe the city needs to approve any assignment under the agreement, though, which is pretty standard. I'm trying to find that language.
Well, the question is would sale of the building constitute, sale of the project constitute an assignment under the agreement, or would assignment of the management process?
Well,
I'd have to read most of the agreement again and go through the agreement to see if it appears elsewhere. If you'd like, while you're going on, I can do that.
Section 9.9.
Yeah.
It says the developer agrees that it shall not sell, assign, or otherwise transfer any of its rights and obligations under this agreement in whole or in part without the prior express written consent of the city, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And I assume that lasts for 5 years. That's my
Yes.
assumption. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yeah.
so it would be Green Street Realty that would own the building for 5 years unless the city agrees to allow. Is that correct, Brandon?
Effectively, yeah.
Okay.
Although there is a provision to allow Green Street to assign to, because they'll probably create an LLC.
Yeah, Green Street Realty doesn't own anything, any actual physical assets. They're the management side, but we'd have an entity that I own that would be separate as the owner. But
So how would that work in this agreement? I mean,
The entity, ultimately, the way it should work, now I didn't draft this agreement, but ultimately, the way it should work is the entity that is going to own it should be the signatory to the agreement.
So it should not be Green
if
Street
Chris,
Realty.
What?
It should not be Green Street Realty. It should be the LLC.
Well, we haven't set up the LLC yet because we don't have approval. So we right now have it written as Green Street Realty. So if we do it as Chris's Apartments LLC or whatever we end up doing, we'll make sure that's in this final. This is a kind of a final worked out agreement, other than we know that Green Street Realty will not be the actual
This is
owner of the property, because Green Street Realty is our management agent. It doesn't actually own any of the properties that I own and other entities. We've got multiple.
This is very common with developers who develop multiple projects, not a one-off situation where an LLC, some do it through a corporation, or corporations where the LLC owns the one project, and the quote developer, in this case Green Street, sets up multiple LLCs or corporations, whatever their model happens to be, to own the separate projects. That also limits and helps for the developer shield their liability, so if there are problems with one project, it does not affect any other project.
So I'm not totally familiar with how LLCs are set up. Does that mean that we would know who the owners of the building are if it's under an LLC? Or is that
It's in that respect, it's no different than a corporation. If Chris sets up ABC LLC and then CDEF LLC, finish the rest of the alphabet, that's who owns the property. The LLC owns the property. LLC is
limited
like
liability?
a corporate, yeah, it's a limited liability company, and it has owners. They're called members, and the members can be the managers, which are the officers, or there can be people who do not have an ownership interest who can be the managers of the property. It's possible that Green Street could be the manager of the property, while, use Chris's example, Chris's apartments could be the owner. If you look up on the Secretary of State's website, it will identify who the manager is. Won't identify the owners.
Okay, so it won't identify the
no more
members
than
of the LLC.
private corporation. You don't know who the shareholders are unless it's a publicly traded corporation, which obviously these aren't.
Okay, so my last I have two big questions. The first one is this agreement basically sells the land for $1, right?
Yep.
And does that title immediately go to the LLC or to Green Street Realty once it is signed, or do they have to complete the project?
No, it goes right away. They can't. It
can't
becomes
do it.
difficult for them to get financing to build a project on land they don't own. It also becomes difficult to deal with utilities. It becomes difficult to deal with the contractors and the subcontractors who may have mechanic lien rights. If you get into a mechanics lien situation and one person owns the property, the city owns the property, well, now we've got a problem because theoretically there are mechanic liens, not his. So no, you would, and the city, it would be in the city's best interest. Once the agreement is done, there would be a closing. Chris would dig into his pocket and find $1 or maybe some loose change, and the title would transfer, and away he goes. The LLC starts building the project.
In the agreement, I've also signed a personal guarantee, I believe, of $1 million. The idea behind that was for me to go, you sell this to me for $1, and the next day I say, I'm not doing it, I'm going to sell it to my buddy down the street for $500,000 or $1 million, pocket the money, the development never happens. Well, the city has thought through those things, and I have come up with some language that binds me to not being able to do that and doing the project, so seeing its completion. So we've got the guarantee in there, and that covers the city from
The structure of this redevelopment agreement or development agreement is very similar to redevelopment and development agreements that we have reviewed where there is city property or city involvement through TIF funding. This actually Ken Beth's firm, I believe, drafted this agreement. I'm familiar with his, for the most part, template, and he has used this for years and years, and it works. It works very effectively. A best example is, for those who happen to remember, the hotel across the street. We advanced over $1 million to that individual, and his project failed. And we obtained a judgment against him. He happened to own the property in his own name. We got a judgment against him, and as he was beginning to think about selling the property, he happened to walk in with a check made payable to the city for $1,090,000 based on the strength of the agreement.
My last question is for Brandon. So I think that you estimated break even is at 2020. Is that correct?
2030, I believe.
2023. And then the
2030,
TIF goes on to 2040.
That's correct.
And so you estimate that it will add 1.98 million to the TIF by 2040? No, I'm confused by that
Yeah, I
number.
apologize. I used a couple different ways of talking about this. Yeah, I'm going to go back to my slides because I set them up because I realized the memo was a little confusing. I'll make that bigger for everybody. So that second bullet point there, it's going to generate about 3.4 million in new TIF revenues over the full life of the TIF based on the estimate, and the spreadsheet's in the packet as well. In those first 5 years, we rebate the 450,000. That's the stair-step rebates. So that takes us down to about 3 million total over the life of the TIF. That's that third point down below. So if we were to take the value of that property as it's assessed or appraised today, actually back in 2015, 1 million, the TIF achieves that value by about 2030. So it's about, I think, 13 years to the break-even point. But it's not break-even based on a cash investment the city's making. It's based break-even on the value we say it is. But it's important to actually think through the alternative scenario because the city would actually have to attempt to sell this property to get that $1 million. And to get that same return of having $3 million in the bank on that $1 million, we'd have to invest that money and lock it away for about 24 years and get about at least a 3% return. And at the end, we wouldn't necessarily have a project, let alone having the amount of control and say and public input on the outcome of that project as we've had for this process. So I hope that's...
Well, I'm still confused, but
I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. I
Okay.
won't belabor the thing. I do have one quick question. How much TIF funds did we use to purchase and demo the land that we're...
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. The acquisitions extend back quite some time into the past, and it's not entirely clear. It would take a fair amount of staff research to determine that. I have
Okay.
several feet of files of the acquisitions, demolitions, environmental reports, but a lot of effort did go into acquisition and demolition, that's for sure. It is a sunk cost, though. The only value we have is the value of the property as it sits today, and that's what's most relevant for the city's determination of whether or not this makes fiscal sense moving forward.
All right. Well, congratulations. You made it through my 10 questions. Thank you very much.
Jared?
Chris, I had one question on design change with the breezeway off of Vine Street going away, and now there's a covered walkway through there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Just thought it would be convenient to have a nice pass-through area that residents could easily get to the street. And we tried to avoid having those everywhere in the project and not make it a thoroughfare for, you know, people maybe that are causing problems and find it's a great place to escape and hide from whatever they're hiding from. But we like that little breezeway. We did one similar to this on another project recently, and I think it just kind of creates those units that are in the breezeway area actually extra large. They've got an extra room in them, so those are going to be kind of premium type units. But we like that access because our goal is to get people directed to downtown. We want to make it easy for them to get there and get back through, and having to walk all the way around the project or through small sidewalks. We thought this was a little more inviting, just added something other. I mean, obviously we're missing, if we didn't make that a breezeway, we could get another bedroom or two in there and get some more income, but we kind of gave that up with the idea that we thought it was kind of a nice feature, inviting something different than just a long stretch of building.
Because that was just open in the initial
Yeah,
one.
before we had the buildings, just a big gap between those. So we thought, let's use the above that space for some actual usable square footage for those residents that are in those what'll be larger townhouses where those two breezeways are at. And we did have a comment today about they look awfully dark. Well, this right now is just a rendering, and we're under certain standards to have so much lighting, candle wick, things we have to have for code in there. So it'll be a well-lit area, and it's not very long. It's me to you probably deep. They're not real, deep units, but I thought it was a nice feature. Certainly could go away, but just something we kind of threw in there to change it up a little bit.
Sure. Bill, I'd like to make a motion.
I have a couple
Unless
questions.
You were going to go.
Dennis, do you want to take the chair so I can ask a couple questions?
Certainly. Okay. Bill, do you have a question, please?
Yeah, I have a couple for Chris and a couple for staff.
Okay.
So just to make sure, I think when I was looking at Libby's slides, it looked like there was one overhead view that showed the new design, but with one entry off of Urbana Street instead of two entries, one off of Urbana and one off of Elm and one off of Green. So this one that's on the screen now, that's the final design with the two entries?
That's the way we have it right now. Yeah, we thought that just adding all these entries didn't really need to do that with this size of development. We thought this was still kind of creates a little private area where the development is, got some feel of privacy to it, not a bunch of various places where not only residents could go in, but other people could get in there and drive around. So we like the little exclusive nature of it. I mean, you could ultimately even, you could even gate it in a scenario like this if you ever wanted to, but we avoided that. It also allowed us to get another bedroom or two, which helps our economics since we've upped the kind of finishes to this on the exterior with more bricks. So we liked that kind of being a solid run there in the back, kind of a U-shaped setup. I don't believe we have a breezeway going through that back for that exact very reason. We don't want to create it so it's a place you can hide.
So is that the main reason why it was pushed out to Vine Street then? Because we have two driveways now instead of the one off of Urbana Street?
That's right. We're also going to have to deal, like I said, with the power poles and the existing kind of alleyway that's there now. There really isn't a way for us to reroute that, so that's kind of where those line up. And it may not show it right now to exact scale, but we in essence are going to use that that's there now as the dividing line of the kind of where the U takes place.
Okay, and then on the corner units on Vine Street, the ones with windows on both sides, I think in the plan it was referred to as live work or something.
Talked about that. I think
office
that was
or something.
Yeah, one of the suggestions in the previous meetings was maybe you could have one where somebody could have a little, boutique business of some kind. Maybe it's an office space. So we have them set up right now. I believe those corner units that way where somebody could live there and maybe and whether we do that or not. We thought, and whether that changes code and a bunch of other stuff, I don't know yet, but we threw them in as a kind of a neat little option. We thought maybe it would be obviously small service type stuff, or maybe somebody's office space. But those are kind of what we kind of threw a little bit of everything in here. But those could just end up being just apartment units, or if we go that route, they might be a live work type unit.
And even the ones in the middle of the block there that have garages, those have a little office in front too, right?
I think those have more glass right now. I think we kind of have, those could potentially be the same. I can't remember on that layout if we say live work on those as well.
Doesn't say live work, but it looked like
I think we had the
there wasn't a
corners kind of
bedroom or
in
anything
mind,
down
so
there.
it didn't become a retail strip center. We just wanted to, whether that's something somebody is interested in or not.
Yeah, I think
thought
that
it was
could be
unique.
a selling point.
It was
for
a good
somebody
idea
that-
when somebody mentioned it in the last
Yeah.
meeting.
And then on the accessibility, it's really hard just because they're townhouses. I mean, ideally, even for an accessible unit, it seems like you really want one floor. So a multi-family residential building with an elevator and get everything on one floor for each unit. So was the decision to build townhouses, I know that was one of the options in the RFP, but there were other options. Was the decision to do that mostly based on the tax?
Yeah, that was a
rebate?
good incentive. I think I think the other groups that probably looked at this probably the same idea. You're looking for any economic, type advantage you can take. That program's been a good program. It sounds like for the city. It's living out in Stone Creek. I certainly see a lot of construction going up because of it. We certainly took advantage of it. If this was a traditional apartment building with floor 1, 2, and 3, those adaptable in a 3-story construction or 2-story construction, elevators aren't required, so you'd have your handicap units along that first floor. But these are adaptable. Whether or not this is going to be an attractive design for, well, there's a lot of different disabilities, like John mentioned, but if you're in a wheelchair, it's still going to be an option for you. We feel like it's, there may be an option for somebody if they wanted that type of townhouse unit.
For some of the two-story units on the back side, it looked like the entryway is like in the kitchen from the outside of the square. Would it be possible to make that a walk-up and make a one-bedroom downstairs and a one-bedroom upstairs or something?
We talked about that. You get into a lot of issues with fitting in your stairs and your layouts, and these are pretty tight unit layouts, and they're difficult to get all of the space you need required by code and to fit in stairs in them beyond the initial stair to get into your main unit. That's a lot of times why you see that kitchen, kind of you come into a living room or kitchen area on that first floor. These will likely have living room, kitchen on the main floor, and then the bedrooms upstairs in the twos. On the threes, they'll have, I believe we show some kitchens on the second floor. You kind of go in the garage areas, and there's a bonus room there, and the bedrooms are upstairs.
Okay, and then on the TIF revenue projection, there's a little figure about hard costs there. It says total construction costs $7 million, hard costs 4.2. Does that total construction cost include land? Probably not.
Yeah, construction cost does not include land. We're thinking this is somewhere between $5 and $7 million. We think it's going to land $6 to $6.5 million for the construction cost. In most of our developments, land is typically 10% of our cost on a lot of our developments. So this is obviously a nice
land, might be $7 to $8 million, and we're talking
about
with
land. If you put a value of $1 million on the land, the project may, be a $7.5 million type total project all in.
So that means there's over about $3 million in soft costs. Or is that kind of high?
We don't even have real numbers. We're just throwing stuff in right now without a full set of plans. It's very difficult to. We can come up with, hey, it's going to be $100 a foot or $120, $110 a foot. But again, until we get kind of that final version of plans and get everything bid out, we're guessing a little bit on cost. We did a project similar to this across the Champaign Library, although they are not townhouse style. They are 3-story, and those came in around a little over $100,000 a unit. We had they're a lot smaller than these. Those 1 bedrooms are 550 square feet, and the 2 bedrooms are 850 square feet. These are significantly bigger. We are typically pricing this type of product for rent at $1.20 to $1.30 per square foot. Since these units are so large, 1,250 square feet to 1,750 square feet, we're going to be more in that $1 to $1.10 type per square footage. So you can kind of take our square footages and put $1 to $1.10 on those. The larger units will be more towards the $1 a foot, just because the market doesn't bear a lot more rent just because the unit's larger. So we're definitely going to be at the mid-tier for new construction on the 2 bedrooms. The 3s are kind of an unknown entity off of campus. On campus we might get $2,500 for a 3-bedroom, like on an 809 Nevada. These are going to be $1,500 to $1,700, which is a pretty good, I think, a pretty good price point is what we're shooting for. We've got to price them competitively or they won't lease.
Yeah, I think we all appreciate that there's risk involved because there just hasn't been any building in this area in quite a while. So we understand that there's going to be a premium for us to get that risk.
Yeah, it's a little unknown as far as the development area, but I'm really excited about it. I wouldn't do it. I certainly don't need to be doing it. My staff doesn't want me to add any more projects to our plate, but we feel really good about it. We think it's just such a unique. We don't have anything in downtown Urbana, and we get a lot of requests. We've got a few scattered site buildings, but I think it's going to be very successful, and I think it's just going to boost what's going on down here. I believe there's a lot of momentum, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about building the tax base as well on this and several other projects. We sent in another project today for something we're looking to do along University Avenue that has no incentives to it. So just excited overall and still very bullish on the market. believe it or not.
And then my last question, I'm not sure if it's for staff or for Mr. Saunders, but I think it's section 5.5 talks about the owners or owners and successive owners through 2042, the end of the agreement, can't apply for any property tax exemption. And I know we've done that before, especially with hospital developments and stuff, or private developments of hospitals like the Hampton Inn. I think that was in there, and I think it's boilerplate language for TIF developments. Does that also prevent application for homestead exemptions?
I don't believe, somebody asked that question today. I'm not 100% sure these are going to apply for the homestead exemption, just based on the fact that it's more of an apartment setup, unless we individually pin these, which we talked about possibly doing with the idea of being able to resell them individually. Of course, we would take advantage of the homestead exemption if it's offered. We've done that before, I think. And people are always confused on what that means, and that really only means that you pay what everybody else pays in taxes, not any less than what everybody else pays. It's just, it costs more. The commercial type properties are taxed at a little higher rate, and it requires, of course, the tenant to sign off on all the forms. So we do that in a lot of our single family condo type developments. This could qualify for it. It would not be something that would be needed in that first 5-year period. And I think that language is pretty boilerplate in there, that 5.5. That's just saying we got to keep it for the 5 years, and that time that one incentive that's offered will be exhausted. And then if there is other incentives that are offered to anybody in the area, I think it's saying those, whether it's me or a successive owner, could have that opportunity to apply for them and not be penalized because they received, the Think Urbana. I can't imagine what it would be. My guess is most of your incentives would be for new development, likely not some existing project, but I think it's pretty boilerplate. We didn't look at that and say, great, we got the 20-year or whatever it was. It's right. We get the idea behind the contract is to make us follow our obligations, and we're getting some benefit out of it, obviously, on the land and the tax benefit, but to like turn the project and try to resell it before we complete it or something is not our plan. I plan on keeping the project for.
So I guess my main concerns is the ADA accessibility. I don't know if there's any way to look again at those 2-story units and see if maybe we could do a walk-up. The other is the setback and what kind of drove that. And some of it's kind of our policies and things that we need to take a look at. The other part that bothers me a little bit with the building right there facing west is imagining walking by there on a hot summer afternoon with the sun blasting off the building onto the sidewalk. And I don't know how much heat that brick's going to absorb or emit from absorbing the sun, but at least I guess the sawtooth shape might dampen that a little bit. And
I'm excited there'll be something to have sun come off of instead of but yeah, no, I don't think, I think we're, like I talked about, one of our big issues, challenges in this project are going to be the given fact that we've now determined there's not a lot we can do about the power line that runs down the existing alley. We're going to get an easement from the city for that alley, but that's where that stuff's going to sit, and likely right where those entries are going to come. So the further we keep pushing off Vine, I'm concerned we're going to shrink this project and maybe lose a set of units because we don't have a lot of physical space there. And again, I think this B4 zoning doesn't have any setback requirements, so I think it's going to look really good up closer to the street on that front side, give more of that commercial feel like you've got when you're walking downtown, or some of the feedback on a project we looked on University Avenue last year, we had it set off the street, and a lot of the feedback was, oh, put it up on the sidewalk, and I guess we're not sure, but I don't think this is going to look unusual or way out of place. I think it's going to look really nice, actually, and but we're going to be careful not to. If we got room to set it back some, we're certainly going to do that. We don't have a desire to be right on the sidewalk for any other reason other than just space, needed space.
It looked to me like the original plan was about 102 bedrooms, and this one might be 92, 94, or something like that.
We lost a few beds, yeah, in this. And again, this could be, we've got kind of those minimums in that plan, and again, once we lay it out with our civil engineer and actually lay it out on the real site, right now, this is just dropping schematics in. So it's going to change slightly, but it's going to generally be somewhere in this, this range of units. So again, we can't shrink them this way a whole lot more and get everything in by code that's needed.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
I think they're very attractive looking, functioning units. I'd rent one if I didn't already have a house.
Yeah, I know. That's ideal. We think the same thing.
So I'll return the chairmanship back to Bill if he'll acknowledge one more question.
Actually, I think there might be two more. Eric's was first.
All right.
Well, it's just a comment. I guess people have different reactions, and maybe this is colored by the fact that I grew up in New York City, right in Manhattan. And I think it's okay for something that's in an urban location to look urban. So this is okay. It looks like it seriously, like it makes us look like a serious city.
I think it's just going to change this whole landscape as you go down the. I mean, I think it's going to be for the positive. I think it's going to. I mean, people are going to notice it because it's been so long as a single-story building with a big grass lot. So I do think people that haven't been paying attention to the project and live in Urbana or Champaign and get by it are going to be impressed, and it's not going to be a hulking, it's going to look, I think it's going to look like it fits in pretty well.
Dennis.
Yeah, I just thought of one other thing that maybe I have a little bit of concern about, but maybe not. In all the plans that you show, both in the 2-story and the 3-story apartment buildings, there's multiple bathrooms. And so on the 2-story with no balcony, there's a small bath on the first floor. On the second, there's 2 baths. And the same with the third. So it kind of makes me think that you're really thinking about student housing, not professional housing or family housing, because, and maybe you can just address this, because, many families can share a bathroom. They won't need the second bathroom on the second floor or the third floor. So are you going to be offering flexibility whether there's a third bath, or these are all going to be,
yeah.
Is your goal to rent this to people who are not related but are sharing space? Or to families who are related?
I think both. I think you could have, friends that work downtown and the bars or restaurants that might want to live together. But the trend in the business is bed to bath parity as much as you can get. So when you have a 2-bed, 1-bath or a 3-bed, 1-bath, I think we'd be doing a disservice to even families, because I have got 4 kids myself and we don't like sharing bathrooms. I think that's the trend in off-campus development and campus. If we can put 2-bedroom and 2-bath in, everybody likes having that second bath, and that's really the driving force. We don't see this as a room-by-room rental where we're like, okay, you rent a room and you rent a room like we might on campus at Capstone Quarters, which we've managed for 10 years. We have a lot of 4-bed, 4-baths, and the reality is we rent those in individual leases, and they may not know each other. We look at this as being a joint lease, whether it's, Brandon and I signing a lease or a family. And I think that's just an extra that's an extra cost. It'd be a lot cheaper to build them without, 99 bedrooms and 99 bathrooms. But we like the extra, that thing just is a huge selling point. I think we have to have something here to hook you and make you choose this over something else. And my take on the market is, when people go, aren't you worried about saturation and all the stuff being built? Of course I am, but I'm also not saying that I need more residents to fill these apartments. We're planning on taking people and filling them from other stuff. So somewhere else there's going to be some holes until either our population grows or more jobs are created or the university enrollment grows. So it's a competitive world, and that's the main reason we put the extra baths in.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Marlin.
I will weigh in on bathrooms. The one thing about your design that's different from others is that you have a master bedroom and a master bath, and that's going to set these units apart as well. So I think it'll appeal to a wider demographic. So,
and if we decide to sell these as, we have the ability to make them 0 lot lines or condos in the documents, and they may be something down the line that that people want to buy and own, and that's certainly a possibility. We want to tread that very carefully at the front side, because you could get in a situation where you put them out as condos and sell 3 of them, and then people have financing issues. But I think I want to keep that option open, and they're set up that way as individual units with a lot of them with garages, that somebody may choose to say, I'd like to just own mine. It's in a great location, and think of them as condos as well. So we certainly are trying to think of all those types of things. I think the challenge with doing it right now in this market on the front end is we may get ourselves in contracts and only have a few that take advantage of it, and we want to run them and operate them a while and maybe have that option down the road.
Any more questions? Sure. Cerise,
again,
sorry.
yes. Again, I'm not familiar, but I do have a question about, are there any units that are going to be set aside for a more affordable price for people who actually would like to own property or be able to rent well, but it not cost so much?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. These currently don't have an affordability clause to them necessarily, where a certain amount has to be at a certain rent level. We've got other projects in the market that are like that, where they've got to be at a certain 60% of the salaries or the income of the area. It's not like that, but I will tell you on these, new construction is not cheap. And these are going to be at the lower tier, in my opinion, of the projects being built on the price scale. So somebody that is looking around and looking at multiple options of choosing something brand new, I believe these are going to be affordable in that sense. But affordability is a whole nother discussion, what is affordable for certain people or not. And we think they're going to be affordable for new standards, new construction.
I'm just thinking about maybe, what a person's average salary nowadays seems to be, because salaries are still very stagnant. And I don't know, I was just wondering if that was at all in the ballpark where you guys were thinking about making something more affordable in the area. I mean, there's a school there's schools in the area and everything, and I'm sure there'd probably be young families that would want to move in the area. Or even in that.
I think Brandon's got a reply too on maybe another project.
Okay, Brandon.
Yeah, just to be clear, that the city, going back to the original issuance of the request for proposals, requested that this be a market rate project. And so we talked to sort of developers who wanted to deliver that kind of a project. However, we had separate conversations with developers about affordable housing developments. And so the next item on the agenda actually relates to one of those projects that Brinshore Development is proposing for approximately 40 affordable units in an apartment building with, I think, 9 tiny homes and 6 artist live workspaces and a community arts center. The next agenda item isn't directly about the project, it's about the land that it's being proposed for. However, the city's response has been to try to seek a variety of housing to meet the needs of our downtown. So this project meets one set of needs for young professionals, empty nesters, graduate students, and the affordable project will meet needs for a different group of potential residents for our downtown. And then the student housing projects, such as the rail project that's been announced and the other projects Chris has been working on, meet needs for students as well. So we don't generally try to meet all those needs in one project.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion, Jared.
I'm going to move ordinance number 2019-01-005, an ordinance approving redevelopment agreement with Green Street Realty Company of Illinois and authorizing the sale of certain real estate, specifically the 200 block of South Vine Street and the 300 block of East Green Street, be forwarded to the full council with a recommendation for approval.
I'd like to second that.
Been moved by Jared and seconded by Dennis. Is there any discussion now, or have we already discussed out?
Please, no.
No. Let's move on.
No discussion?
No discussion.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
And Brandon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Next is ordinance number 2019-01-006, an ordinance approving and authorizing a second amendment to the new Lincoln Square parking agreement. Brandon.
Hello again. So, as the ordinance title notes, this is a second amendment. The original agreement for parking with Lincoln Square was entered into by the city back in 2005, and it was first amended in 2011. And what this agreement does is it was predicated on two things. One, a discussion with the mall owner about the Health Alliance leaving the mall and a request for more flexibility in that agreement and some cost relief because of the mall not using as much parking as it once had, because the current agreement requires the mall owner to lease 100 spaces whether they're being issued permits or not. The other conversation was with Brinshore Development about the proposed Urbana Arts project that's been announced, and again, that's an affordable housing development. In order for them to proceed with their application to the Illinois Housing Development Authority for those low-income housing tax credits, which I think will occur in February, they need to have a letter from the city about our ability and interest in making that property available for sale to allow that project to proceed. So this agreement accomplishes both of those things. Specifically, it eliminates Lot 24 and 24 West, which are the lots south of Illinois near the mall, from the parking agreement. It gives the mall the ability to lease a specific number of permitted spaces from 0 to 100 in the adjacent parking area. Currently, the adjacent parking area is just a 1-block radius around the mall, so that really just leaves these lots, well, the lot that we're proposing, the 200 Vine project is a part of, and the parking deck as options. So this amendment does one additional thing, and it expands the definition of that adjacent parking area to include lots that are within 1/3 of a mile walking distance of any entrance to the mall, and that includes the now vacant Civic Center parking lot where there's 98 parking spaces. So in the event that the mall owner needs to utilize those spaces, they could be made available, and the mall would be charged per space at that time. This agreement is designed to take effect retroactively on December 1st, 2018. And yeah, overall, it sets the stage for a new potential future redevelopment for our downtown, meeting a need that hasn't been addressed, and that is for affordable housing in the core downtown near many services and businesses. And it also assists the mall owner in being flexible as the mall continues to transition. Take any questions you might have.
Any questions for Brandon? Mary Alice.
Two quick questions. My first question is, if they do choose to rent extra spaces, say 30, is that term, that lease, a year? Do they commit to a year, or is it month by month?
I think it is a monthly fee in the amendment, and they have to give
30 days notice?
Yeah, they
60
have to
days
give
notice?
30 days notice. So I don't think there's a limit on the term of when they're leasing. However, some of this does occur administratively in that it takes time to issue permits and potentially move spaces around, and our parking folks at the city handle that in close coordination with the mall owner.
And who's allowed to select the location of the spaces? You mentioned the Civic
city
Center.
retains.
So the city would say, I mean, the owner would say, I need 50 spaces for the next 6 months, and the city would say, you can have these. Is that correct?
Yeah, the city retains the right to determine.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Quick question.
Just a quick comment. I wanted to thank mall owner Jim Webster and Brandon Boyes and Carol Mitten for getting this negotiation done. It was it was a little complex to do it, but I think it's to both our advantages. For the mall owner, it's flexibility and reduced cost, and for the city, it's flexibility in being able to develop this site, and it will allow the Bryn Shore project to move forward. So I really appreciate the work that went into this.
Okay, is there a motion? Yeah, I'll make it. Yeah, I think this is a great project. I really support it. It's, I really like the idea that it's expanding the width or the depth of our downtown, which I think has been waiting on the horizon for such a long time, and now we're actually achieving it. And it's going to bring value to yet more properties in the community. So I'd like to forward ordinance, or I'd like to move to forward to the City Council with approval, ordinance number 2019-01-006, an ordinance approving and authorizing a second amendment to the new Lincoln Square parking agreement.
I will second that gladly, with much enthusiasm.
Okay, Dean, motion by Dennis and seconded by Dean. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have resolution number 2019-01-001R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement, National Integrated Ballistic Information Network Equipment. Chief Seraphin.
All right. Hello. Welcome. So in 2013, there was a striking uptick in gun violence in our community, and we've wrestled with this in many different ways. Things like the Champaign County Community Coalition has really stepped up to the plate, offered different programs such as Fresh Start. We've and then other all sorts of different things with Park District and work programs. We've addressed certain things through our multi-agency enforcement team of our Street Crimes Task Force, which focuses a lot on gun violence. And, well, we've had another opportunity for another piece of equipment. And as you may have seen in your packet material, the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority helped us, and specifically the city of Champaign, as far as being the lead agency with obtaining a NIBIN system, which is that very nice long thing, the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. And essentially what it does is uses digital imagery as a database for casings, on spent firearm casings, in addition to the actual spent projectiles themselves, although I do believe that the casings are its forte based on our experience. NIBIN was established in 1999. It's operated under the ATF, and claims about 74,000 hits have been obtained. So essentially when a firearm, the firing pin strikes the back of the cartridge and the cartridge is expelled, it leaves a unique identifying mark, and this is not exactly like fingerprinting, but that's sort of the idea, that it's a tool mark that is unique, and then we can then match casings left maybe from shooting A in Urbana to shooting B in Champaign. Currently, the nearest NIBIN machine that we have access to is located in Peoria, and having one here locally in the Champaign Police Department is an absolute incredible uptick in our efficiency, especially for our evidence technician. There are 4 agencies who are looking to go in with regards to helping with the support, the warranty, and the extended warranty and maintenance. So the initial outlay of just over $200,000 is part of the funding of the grant funding. The remaining funds, and that includes 1 year of warranty and upkeep. The remaining 3 years are divvied up then amongst 4 different agencies, and Urbana's chunk is around $14,000 over those 3 years. And so the intergovernmental agreement that we're asking for is so that we can continue to support this project as we move forward, and hopefully speed up our response to these types of investigations. And it's I think a very good tool, and one we just don't use very often because of the space and time involved in getting to Peoria. So I'll take any questions.
Will this basically be, the center that's going to be created in your offices be like basically a computer desk? Is it computer-based, or do you have to have hardware also?
It's a combination of both, and I'm not an expert with exactly what the machinery is. But yes, it will be, and it will be, again, this will be housed actually in Champaign. So our technician will still have to remove this box of casings and that bag of casings and package them up, but then just drive across town. So, but yes, it is actual machinery.
So so do you need to scan the casings and then enter that into your ballistic
Correct.
dataware?
Yes.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
I just wanted to know, so when you scan the casings, there's a search for same kind of firing pin type of Who's-Its on the casing?
The Who's-It, yeah. It's yeah, it's a tool. It's like a tool mark. That's the section of the lab, I guess, where they,
Right.
you know. So yes, there's a certain amount, and I'm not an expert in exactly how that works and how the firing pins and the orientations and the calibers and all of those things would go together. But yes, it would be a photograph, and then it's expanded up to some ridiculously high level of magnification.
Okay, so my other question is would this require another person to transport these kinds of things to keep the chain of evidence together, or?
No, we believe we can do this with our current evidence technician staff.
Okay.
This is coming from forfeiture funds, which, if I remember correctly, can only be spent for law enforcement equipment. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that in mind, I would hope that we can make a motion to send this to City Council with full recommendation for approval.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. For resolution number 2019-01-001R, a resolution approving intergovernmental agreement, National Integrated Ballistic Information Network Equipment, Police Department.
I'll second it as read.
Is moved by Dean and seconded by Jared. I did have one more question. Do you know if the hits that are obtained from this, are they admissible evidence in court, or is it more for investigation and exploring?
Probably both. So what would ultimately happen is it's sort of like a fingerprint. We might get an initial hit, and then someone would take the fingerprint, they would take the casing, and an actual tool mark person at the lab would then go, yes, indeed, that is the same tool mark, just like they said that is the same fingerprint. So it's initially an investigative tool, and then it becomes when they make the confirmation, then it would become court worthy.
And is there a false positive rate or anything on those?
There has been some discussion about that, and I think that speaks a little bit to the fact that there are fewer. There aren't as many casings as there are fingerprints in the database, but I don't think that's an issue for us to worry about now, simply because of, again, that one-to-one mark is, or one-to-one match would follow up.
Okay, thanks. Any discussion? Eric?
I guess it's just a question. So I quickly Googled Nibbin, and one of the things that I'm seeing very quickly is that there's a wide range of effectiveness with which the tool is used from
Right.
one jurisdiction to another. So I'm sure that we're going to get trained and we'll be up to speed. Do you think that the use of this tool will be part of what's going on at Police Training Institute?
It might be mentioned. I don't know that they would necessarily train them. We will probably have 2 or 3 people that would be trained up enough and have the expertise to go over and actually sign on to the machine and make the requisite scans and entries. I think some of what you've read there on NIBIN, as I did, that it's a function, as you can see, we don't have a very high success rate of entry because we don't have, it's quite cumbersome for us to do that.
Yeah.
So I think as they spread more and they become used, I believe that Springfield, or Sangamon County, is going through a similar process as Champaign County is. I think I was just up visiting my folks in the Chicagoland area, reading a newspaper in Aurora, Illinois. PD is also getting a NIBIN machine. So I think it spreads, it will become a much more widely used tool.
So it'll be something that maybe some part of our force would be trained in, like we have some crisis intervention team people.
Correct.
So now we'll have
Correct.
some NIBIN people who
Yes,
become
this is,
expert
and
in
this is clearly probably going to be function more as far as like the evidence technician, the backup person who works in investigations division. They'll be the ones that'll have the training, but I would expect a patrol officer or a detective on the scene just collect the casings, and then we'll get them to the right people for entry within the next few days.
Okay. Any other discussion, comments? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Our last ordinance up tonight is an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing number of Class BB liquor licenses for Analog Urbana, LLC DBA Analog Urbana, 129 North Race Street, Urbana.
Yes, this is a new business located, well, just north of the parking lot by the Courier Cafe on Wright Street. So they are looking for the BB license, which will increase from 5 to 6. There's a couple of other changes on your chart there that I just wanted to call your attention to. We had a Class A license number go from 13 to 12. That was related to the construction at the Tin Roof Tavern in Urbana. They were under construction last year. They didn't renew their liquor license before the December 31st timeline. And then on the back page, they also held a video gaming license. They also did not renew that. They, however, do intend to, but because they didn't renew by the deadline, they have to reapply for a whole new license, and they're going to be doing that now that construction is finished. So this decrease is temporary in those licenses. Then the R1 decrease from 9 to 8 is for Rainbow Garden. The business was sold. It's got a new owner, and they are no longer selling liquor. So that's the explanation behind those changes.
Bill?
What? Do you have to excuse yourself again?
No. So I thought it would be fun for me to make the movement to pass this ordinance for the first time since I've been on council.
It's a motion, not a movement. That's something different.
That would be back there.
Okay, Jared.
All right. I'd like to make a motion that we move ordinance number 2019-01-007, which was just read, so I'm not going to repeat it, forward to the full council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
Moved by Jared and seconded by Dean. Sharice, you don't have any conflicts on liquor licenses, do you? Do you own a bar or anything like that? do you
Say
work,
that again?
Do you work for anybody that sells liquor or own a bar or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Just checking.
I consume enough to
Yeah. I didn't look up the building address. It's just north of the Courier. So is that the old beautician building that's finally coming into life again? I love that. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Seeing. Thank you all very much. I think I had my microphone off.
You're going to yell at me for trying to read and understand what you read, aren't you? I can't read.
Well, if you'd like to go, yes.
That's my bedtime. Oh, are you kidding? First of all, I don't drink, and it is literally past my bedtime.